I watched 4 Japanese horror movies, and I'm going to rank them from what I thought the worst was to the best, and I didn't rank one of the films, so I'll just talk about that film last. And with that, let's get into the video. The first film I watched was Carved, the Slit-Mouthed Woman, which I gave 3 stars. Legend holds that 30 years ago, a suburban town was terrorized by the spirit of a woman whose horrid face had become grotesquely disfigured. Roaming the streets, wearing a long coat and carrying large scissors, the spirit would approach her young victims, and while removing the mask, ask if she was pretty. The victim's response would almost always lead to their violent death. So I thought this was a really interesting film. I think the film had some dumb character decisions, which I'm not going to really get too annoyed about because, I mean, if I was put in some of these situations, I probably wouldn't do the smartest things. I think I was a little confused, which with I think all these films I had a little bit of confusion with when watching, probably because it's a different culture and I'm reading subtitles. So that's just kind of a little heads up, I guess. It's not as gory as I thought it would be because we have the slit-mouthed woman who's carrying scissors. You would think that there'd be a lot more gross gore. There really isn't, for better or worse. I mean, I think they could have used the scissors a little bit more. But overall, I found this film pretty interesting. I don't think it was a masterpiece by any means, but I thought it was a pretty good time. The next film is Liverleaf, which I'm going to give 3 or 3.5 stars. I don't know quite yet. The story follows Nozuki Haruku, a middle school student who transfers to a new school in a small town because of her father's work. Unfortunately, she becomes a victim of horrific bullying, but since the school will be closing in 2 months after graduation, no one is willing to help her. So this is a film that I think would go probably somewhere in the disturbing movie iceberg. It would probably be up a little bit higher. So there is a couple problems I have with this film. First being a smaller one for me, but it did have some bad CGI. It didn't ruin the film for me though. It wasn't like the biggest deal. And I really wish that they would have focused on some of the characters' relationships more in this film. There were some relationships that I think I was a little bit more interested in. And I will also say that the second half of this film, I wasn't a big fan of. I don't think it was a bad decision per se, but it wasn't the decision or direction that I wanted the film to go in. So I would have preferred something different. There's a couple things they do with some of the characters that I wasn't a big fan of. Well, specifically one character. But this film does have some really disturbing moments. And it's a bit of a disturbing film. The next film that I would like to talk about is Teke Teke, which I gave 3.5 stars. A young girl learns of the urban legend of Teke Teke after her friend is killed in a gruesome way. The legend tells of a female ghost that has no legs. When she visits the spot where her friend died, she comes into contact with it. So this is the most recent film that I've watched, so I might change my rating on it. I think that it wasn't a masterpiece, but for what it was a lot of fun. It was only about, I think, around 70 minutes long, so it was a pretty short film that I rented for $5, which I think was a little too much. But one thing I will say is, one of the characters that they introduced in this film, it seemed pretty important to the story. About halfway through, this character stopped like being in the story, and it was annoying. You'll know if you watch it. And I think I honestly was more interested in this like romantic angle that was happening in this film that I thought was really interesting than the actual story or the main plot. This might be a little spoiler, but there's a scene where the monster is chasing after this lady, and the lady's able to outrun the monster. But like seeing the monster's speed, you would really think that this monster would be like easily be able to catch up to the lady. But besides that, I mean, this is a simple plot, and it doesn't have the greatest kills, but they're not like horrible. I just thought this was a really fun short film that just turn on and enjoy. It's pretty. I thought it was pretty fun. Now, the next film I want to talk about is the film that I wasn't able to rank, or I just didn't know quite how to rank it, and it's called Kotoko. Suffering from double vision, a single mother tries to take care of her baby in the grip of terrifying hallucinations. Experiencing a nervous breakdown, she is deemed unfit to take care of her child and is taken away from her. The only respite the mother has from her vision is when she sings. So this film, definitely more of a disturbing film. So like 2 of these Japanese films I would say are disturbing, and this one's probably the most disturbing out of the list. I think this film had a lot of shaky cameras, which I believe is on purpose, but I just wasn't a big fan of. This film is very disturbing, like I said. It is pretty intense, and there's some violence. It's not over the top, except for there's one scene that I found really shocking and a bit harder to watch. If you're sensitive to some things, I would definitely recommend looking at what it's rated for on IMDb as a parent's guide. And I just wasn't fully invested in this story. I don't know why. I didn't feel glued to my seat the entire time. But it's just a really interesting way of showing mental illness. And So that was kind of all. I know this isn't a very long video. I just didn't have a whole lot to say about these films, but I am going to make a part 2 to this video because 2 of these films have sequels. So expect a part 2 in the probably next week or the week after that, probably the week after that. And with that, I would love to know your opinion on these films. Tell me if you've heard of these films or not, because I know a lot of these are lesser known, and their sequels in the next video are going to be even more less known. With that, see ya.